excited to see what God's got in store for him in his ministry and where God is going to take him. I want to thank Pastor. Jordan was thinking this morning about standing behind his pulpit and preaching. And I want to thank Pastor for giving me that opportunity to get to do this. A lot of pastors don't like sharing the pulpit, or they're very territorial. And the pastor has got a heart to make disciples and see young ministers grow and give them an opportunity and speak into them and encourage them and teach them what he has been taught through the years. And so I'm grateful to be here and to be able to sit under him and learn, and for him to be able to speak into my life. But I want to come from Ephesians 5, chapter 5, verse 15 and 17. And, we can't relive an hour or a day. Once it's gone by, we can't relive that time. Once it's in our past, we don't have an opportunity. That opportunity is gone to seize that moment. If there was something that God had for us in that time, and we didn't take it, we missed that opportunity. And we got to make sure not only that we seize the opportunities that God has for us, but they're not opportunities of the world. A lot of times the world will present things to us, and we want to make sure that they are opportunities that God has for us. So, when we pray and seek these things, that we pray that God shut the doors that he didn't want us to go through, and he opens the ones that he wants us to go through. But we must use our time wisely. We must keep our eyes on a prize, because once this life is over, it's over. We don't get a pause or a redo or any of that. And once God has pulled our ticket and says that our life is done, it's done. We can't go back and change anything in our life. So we must make the best use of the times and the day that we have. And when we are dead and gone and we're standing, and people are standing there at our funeral or visitation, whatever the case may be, what will people be saying about us? Will they be saying, he was great at sports, he was great at what he did for a career, or he was good at this or that, or will they be saying that he was a great representative of God, that he showed God's love, and that he did the calling upon his life, or she did the calling upon her life that God gave to her, that she utilized, or he utilized every opportunity that God put before them. Because see, when we're laying on that deathbed and we're looking at that last breath, have we done everything that we can do and done everything that God has called us to do? Or have we wasted our whole life and we haven't done anything for the building of God's kingdom? If we look in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 and 17, it says this. It says, "See then them that you walk carefully, not as fools, but as wise men, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is." And we ask, the church said, amen. Now today, or this morning at 2 o'clock, time changed. We lost an hour of sleep. We go through this twice a year. We always, we're either springing forward or falling back. And so this whole week, I've been kind of thinking about that, and that whole hour, and I got to doing some research on this. And I found some pretty neat facts. And daylight savings time was introduced in 1918. It started out overseas, and it was brought here during, I believe it was World War II. And it was in thought that they were going to save energy and fuel during that time. And what it was that they would basically hope that people would go home after work because it was dark, and they wouldn't be spending the fuel. or using, and then they would go to bed earlier because it was dark earlier, so they would be using less energy. Well, when the time changed and the daylights were longer, the sports industry seen a spike in sales. The golf industry, baseball industry, because at the time they didn't have baseball fields that were lighted up, so you couldn't play baseball after dark. So a lot of, so they seen a spike in that. They seen a spike in the golf industry. But then the movie industry, Hollywood, they didn't like the longer days. They wanted the shorter days because people didn't want to go to the movies while it was pretty outside, while it was daylight. So they didn't like they didn't like the longer days. And then actually farmers didn't like the shorter days. They liked the longer days because it left them less time to get their crops to the market, to get their milk from their cows, to go out and sell them. So they liked the longer days. But then in President Nixon, he decided in his presidency that he was going to try a year of no daylight saving time, that he wanted to try to do away with it. And it only lasted a brief time because then he caught backlash from the Department of Transportation because they said that kids were getting killed by standing at stop bus. Yeah, easy for you to say. Just standing out there waiting for the school buses. Well, there was still, they didn't really produce any hard facts, but he was catching enough grease, so he went back to it, to having the daylight savings time. Then in 1986, they decided to add an extra month, to go to 7 months of daylight savings time. And again, it was the golf industry, it was the outdoor industry, the barbecue industry that was really pushing for this because they seen a $200 to $400 million increase in sales during the summertime. Then in 2005, they pushed to have another day, another month added to daylight savings time. But I really found it interesting that the whole time that they've done this, the reason they had, like I said, they had started this was to save energy and fuel. And ever since they had put this into place, they have seen a 4% increase every year of fuel and electricity. So actually they were never saving any money. This has always been drove by the government because it was people lining the pockets of their different politicians and all that to push to keep this in place. And myself, I much rather keep the longer days. I like having the long days and I'm not much on sun setting and being dark by 5. It really, and I'll be honest with you, it messes with my depression. It's something awful. It absolutely, I struggle, and God really helps me to keep it in check, but it seems through these winter months, it really just, it wears on me. But if we look back, if we look at this, there was a time that this worked, that probably having that extra hour would really made a difference. But those days are long and gone. See, because there was a time to where communities would say, roll up the sidewalks, turn off the street lights, because businesses would be closed at night. But see, that's not the case anymore. We look at a lot of businesses, a lot of industries, they've gone to a 24/7 operation. And some of them used to close for holidays, but now they don't even close for holidays anymore. They just keep right on trucking like it's just another day. See, and it doesn't matter now, but it can be 12 o'clock at night or 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and there are a ton of vehicles out on the road. I remember as a kid when we would always travel, Dad always liked traveling at night because there was less vehicles on the road. But now, where we live in a society that is always on the go, there's just as many cars out as there is in the afternoon as there is in the middle of the night. See, we live in a society that they want everything right now. They want to go, they want it right now. They want it fast. They don't want to wait. They want it their way. And if you tell them they've got to wait, well, then they just get all tore up. And see, but I really can't see that moving the clock one way or the other really makes a big difference. I assume they just leave it the way it is. See, I remember back in school, they used to come in and they would either a week before or a week after, depending on what was going on, and they would have to go around and they would physically have to adjust every clock, and they would adjust the bell to ring for the different classes to change. And I remember seeing the frustration in the office staff, because either their clocks were an hour off, they were an hour off one way or the other. So they were writing things down and they would realize they wrote the wrong time down. But then the teachers were frustrated because the bells were ringing at the wrong time. And it probably didn't help any that they had a classroom full of high school kids that seized the opportunity to give them a hard time. See, we seized that opportunity that was presented before. We gave them a hard time through all that. But see, regardless of whether we consider that time change be something that is a nuisance or something that's welcome, see, when we look at that change in time can even teach us something about God's Word. See, time is something that none of us can escape. As long as we live on this earth, we are driven by time. Even when we retire, we still have a time frame that we have to go by. Even especially if you have a job to where you've got to clock in and clock out for your breaks and lunches and all that, because you've got to be there at a certain time. You've got to make sure, because then they can tell if you're late. So you're really driven by that time. So even doing work for the Lord is time driven. Because see, there must be time that's set aside to pray. Time that's set aside to study. Time that's set aside to go visit the ones in the hospital, to go visit the ones at the home. It all must be scheduled and planned. And then when it's scheduled and planned, it's got to be executed at the right time, because if not, then it's not going to happen the way that God intended it to happen. See, time is a fact of life, and it can't escape us. Even the times of our lives that God has established have been affected by sins upon this body. See, way back, if you look in Genesis, God put a limit on man's time in earth. In Genesis 6:3, He said this. He said, "The Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his flesh shall be 120 years old." Now, I found this interesting when I got to looking at some of the people through the Bible that lived a long time. There was Adam, there was Enoch, but Methuselah was one of them that really stood out. None of them made it to 1,000 years, but Methuselah made it to 969 years old. Now imagine 969 years old, the things that someone could see in 969 years, the change in this world. You imagine if someone today was 969 years old, how far that they could look back all the way back to things that happened in World War I and II and the 60s. I mean, the way that the computers and technology and all that has changed. But he lived to 969 years old. But after that, after he died, that's when lifespan began to rapidly go down. Moses lived to 120 years old, and I don't believe anyone lived any longer than that. And see, if you look at today's age, they say that an average American will live anywhere from 72 to 79 years old. And of course, it's different for different people, from men to women, but the average is 79 to 72 years old. And see, with all the emphasis on times, I think Paul had it right here in Ephesians when he said, when he was talking about time. He said, see then, when you walk carefully, not as fools, but as wise men, redeem time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. See, time keeps marching on. It doesn't stand still for no one. We're a quarter of a way through 2019. We just a few months ago entered the third month into this year. See, and every day that we wake up, every day that we wake up and we breathe and we walk this earth, that is one less day that we have. Every night when we lay down our heads to sleep, that's one less day. That's one day closer to the last time that we have that we will lay down. So the question I want you to ask yourself tonight is, what are we doing with our time? What are we doing with the time that God has given us? As Paul says, are we redeeming our time as we should be doing? Are we allowing time to slip by that's unnoticed, that's being wasted, that's being unused, that we're just abusing it? When it comes to the end of our journey, will we look back with regrets? Or will we look back and see a life that we have lived to the fullest and we have done God's will in every aspect that He has called us to do? Day after day passes without people saying a whisper of a prayer. Night after night passes with people getting home from work and just vegging out in front of a TV and just kind of drifting away until it's time for them to go lay down in their bed. See, I know none of us sit around with nothing to do. But and I know we all live a busy life and we have a life with a schedule that is tight. And our jobs demand so much of us. And they put such a heavy burden on us. And there's sometimes that it almost gets unbearable. But what about the times we do have? What about all the times that some of the free time that we have? It may not be a lot, but that little bit of the free time that we do have, what are we doing with that time right there? Are we making use of that time that God has given to you? Doing the work for Him? Or is it being wasted spending on things, taking care of ourselves, doing things that going out and enjoying things of the world? Or are we doing what God has called us to do? See, when was the last time that we spent time on our face crying out for our lost loved ones, for hours, crying and pleading for their salvation, praying for them that they would come to know Christ? When was the last time that we spent time digging into His Word? And I'm not talking just reading, but I'm talking getting in there and digging into that Word and really grasping what God has for us in that Word. When was the last time that we spent that little extra time with God? You know, a lot of times we tell our kids, well, you know, you've been good today, so I'm going to give you a little extra TV time or a little extra video game time or a little extra time outside. But when's that last time that we gave some extra time to Jesus? You see, He's always doing things for us. He's always making life good for us. So when's that last time that we gave Him a little extra time for the things He has done for us? See, it is the times that the things in life, it's made of, and if we ain't careful, that time will pass us by. By 1 second at a time, by 1 minute, by 1 hour, by 1 day, until that time is gone and we haven't accomplished anything for God. We can't let that happen, church. See, we can't, when we have our eulogy, I can't pronounce that word, eulogy read, you know, we can't have it say, well, he just didn't have enough time. They didn't have enough time. You can't say that. You see, I've often, a lot of times when I do a funeral, and I know I've read it here before, but that poem that talks about the dash, that is what our life represents on that tombstone. You have the day you were born and the day you died in your life. Right there in that dash. What is that dash going to represent? See, one day we will have to answer for the minutes and the hours that we have foolishly wasted on the stuff of the world. See, one day we will have to stand before God and explain to Him why we never found time to serve Him or to witness to our neighbors or to answer the call that He has put upon our lives. Then what are we going to say? What excuse are we going to give? And see, and honestly, some people think that they're going to stand before God and give God an excuse, and God's going to say, you know, that's a good one, go ahead. That's a good excuse. You know, I like that one. You know, that one right there is a good one. You can't give him any excuses because we don't have any. See, and a lot of people say, well, some people got more time than me or other people, but the reality is that there's only 24 hours in a day. So the true question is what is your priorities? Where do your priorities lie? What's important to you? Is it a job? Is it a hobby? Is it material things of this world? See, it's easy to tell what's important to someone by what they spend most of their time doing. What do you spend most of your time doing? Is it involved in sports? Is it involved shopping? Maybe it's a job that you love. Maybe it's that it's doing the work that God has called you to do. And see, that's what He wants us to spend our time doing, is doing what He has called us to do. See, I'm not saying that we can't go out and go to the sporting events and go shopping and do all that stuff. Because see, God wants us to get out and be in the world, because then we can witness to people. We can share who He is. We can show them who God is. But see, when we put them things before God, see, that's when we make them our more priority than who the Lord is in our lives. See, God gives us an opportunity wherever we are. The question is what do we do with that opportunity? There's an old Latin saying, and I know I'm not going to pronounce this right, but I believe it's crescending. And basically what that means is to seize the moment. See, and we got to seize the moment. We can't let any moment pass without getting everything out of that moment that we can get out of it. We got to seize that moment. It's very important in serving the Lord, and it's also important in every aspect of our life. You can kind of look at it like this. A husband and wife are out doing some chores and they're getting ready to head back home, and the husband says, you know, I've got to stop at this store over here, and goes by the gas station and it says, you know, it's $2.59, and he knows that it's 10 cents more at home, so he says, you know, we'll stop and fill up before we go home. And he runs into the store and he's got to make another stop, and as they get to the gas station, there's a fuel truck there, and they're filling up the tanks, and now the prices went up 10 cents. And all it took was 15 minutes of putting it off and not filling up. See, now I don't know about you, but see, God often takes opportunities, takes things like that, and the Spirit will say, all right, Robert, we're going to use this for a teaching moment. And I got to go, okay. You know, and I had a battalion chief. That was, you know, you knew when something didn't go right, because when we got back to the station, he said, all right, boys, he said, we're going to have a teaching moment. And so God will take them moments and He'll use them for a teaching moment. See, God does those things. And when He does them, He gives us an opportunity. Over and over and over, God will give us an opportunity. He'll give us an opportunity to represent Him. He'll give us an opportunity to witness. He'll give us an opportunity to serve. And we simply don't need to wait. We need to do it now. See, and just like in that story, see, if they would have went ahead and got that gas, they could have got it at the cheaper price. But now, since they waited, they had to pay the bigger price. See, when you see something and God gives you something to do, well, you might as well just be like the Nike slogan and just do it. Just go ahead and do it. You see, you never know when you're going to have how long you're going to have to say yes to an opportunity that is presented to you. To say yes to that opportunity that God has put before you. Because see, if you wait too long, then an opportunity may never be there again. It'll go on. See, and whenever we know when the sign is going to change, and it's going to change, and our chance is gone. Again, just like that story, that sign, they looked at that sign of the price of that gas, and they didn't, and I guarantee if he would have known that that price was getting ready to go up, that he would have gone ahead and filled it up, but he waited. And so many times we just wait. See, it's not enough that we just say that we're going to do, that we're going to do what God has asked us to do, but see, we must do it when he says do it. And we need to remember, and when he shares it with you, remember that the opportunity may knock, but it doesn't mean that he may wait very long at the door. See, there was this picture that I got to looking at on the internet the other day. And it was Jesus standing there, and he was knocking at the door. And I've looked at this picture, I don't know how many times. You know, I'm sure it's been around for a good long time. And as I got to looking at the picture, I realized that Jesus, there it is, that Jesus, when he was knocking on that door, there was no door handle on that door. And again, I got to thinking, I said, God, that's just like an opportunity. I said, if we don't get up and open that door up, we can't let you in. We can't let that opportunity in. And God is only going to knock on that door for so long before he moves on somewhere else. That opportunity is only going to sit at that door for so long before it moves on to somewhere else. See, some people even come to church their entire lives, and they still won't seize the moment. Because see, when they come to church, their minds start wondering about where they're going to eat lunch, where they're going to go after church, or what the score of the ball game was last night, or what the score of the game is that's going on now, or what they're going to do later on, or different things. Their mind starts wondering. And see, and sometimes they'll even fall asleep and take a nap. Well, if that's what we're going to do, we might as well just stay at home. Because see, we can't go back and get that time back in our life. See, there's no turning back the clock when we and relive that moment in our lives. No matter whether we change the clock or not, that hour is gone forever. We can never get that hour back again. See, we can find time to go out and do things that we enjoy doing, that we want to do, but when it comes to God, we have a hard time finding that time to put into him. See, Paul also said this in Colossians 4, 5 and 6. It says, walk in wisdom towards those who are outside. Redeem the time. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. How are we redeeming time? How can we make sure that moment when we have that opportunity to come to witness or to do the work of the Lord is not wasted? How can we notice? What can we do to seize that moment? The only way that we can do that is getting prepared in advance. See, we can't redeem time to witness if our witness isn't strong and isn't ready for us to be witnessing. How can we tell someone about Jesus if we really don't know him ourselves? How can we go out and do the work of the Lord if we haven't prepared ourselves to do the work, if we to answer that call that he has put upon our lives? See, the part and that's what Paul was talking about when he was saying walk in wisdom. We must allow the grace of God to do the work in us on a constant basis. We must learn to relate to other people in every type of settings and circumstance. We must always be prepared to always give our testimony and present Christ to everyone we meet. To kind of bring all this together, the moment of need. See, we can't wait till that moment of need that comes up. See, we gotta be prepared before that moment of need even comes arise. Because we gotta be prepared. Because see, in that moment of need, there's no time to prepare for it. There's no time to seek God and because at that moment, if we're not ready for it, then that moment is going to be lost forever. See, in the fire service, one of the things we always did, we would go around to different businesses and factories and places, and we would always what we would call pre-plan. That way, if there was a fire, an incident there, we knew the type of chemicals that were on site, the type of where the alarm panel was, where the sprinkler hookup was, where key holder information, where different things were inside the factory on how to get to them. You know, and at 3 o'clock in the morning when a fire is rolling out of the roof, it's not a good time to find out that there's chemicals inside there that once you put water on it, you're going to have a violent reaction. So it's good to pre-plan for stuff like that. It's good to know that different things like that. See, we've got to do the same thing. We've got to be ready. We've got to pre-plan. We've got to be prepared before the situation arises. See, just like an engineer, before they can build anything, a bridge, a building, or anything, they've got to go to school. They've got to learn different things before they're able to go out and start designing buildings and start building projects. Because it takes many years for them studying and preparing for that moment. A teacher's the same way. When a teacher starts teaching something new or something they never taught, they prepare themselves. They study. That way, when they stand before the class to present it, they got their head wrapped around whatever it is that they're trying to teach. Preaching God's Word is the same way. You spend time in prayer. You spend time reading, preparing your message, because you know that this is a message that God has given to you, because someone that is going to be listening needs to hear that word. So then, and likewise with us as Christians, we must spend time preparing ourselves before the situation comes. Because see, even if we're going to do anything for the Lord, we got to prepare ourselves. Because see, how many times have we went to witness and we failed because failed to witness to the lost because we wasn't prepared, we wasn't prayed up, we wasn't ready. How many times have we missed the opportunity to do the work of the Lord because we failed to get prepared for that moment that was presented to us? See, did we spend time before we come to church tonight in prayer? Did we spend time in His Word, getting ready for the service tonight? You know, I can tell you, you know, when I start preparing a sermon, it's usually, and maybe it'll change as I get further into this thing, but I'll usually start on a Monday or something, and I'll start getting an idea, and I'll start kicking it around and start praying about it, and I often, Tuesday, I'm starting to put thoughts on paper, and then usually by Friday, you know, I've got everything kind of lined out on how I want to say it, and I'll even sit down in my mind, I'll start preaching it, trying to make sure that this is what God has for me. And sometimes I get, you know, and if I'm by myself, you might even walk in and I might even be preaching out loud to the four walls that are around me, because I get to talking to myself. But see, we've got to be prepared. See, do we spend time? See, even with singers. See, you come here on Thursday night. Dee has the music people here on Thursday nights preparing for Sunday service. She has us getting ready for Sunday service. The singers practice, the musicians practice. See, even with Richard, when he comes here on Wednesday nights, you know, he's often said that, you know, when I was studying this week, God will give me this and God showed me this. He prepares when he's coming here to teach. Same thing with Pastor. When he gets up and give a message, it's something that he has prepared, something that he has studied. We have got to seize the moment. We got to make time. Time together. You see, it's this time together. When we come together as a congregation, when we sit down and we start sharing that gospel with somebody, see, it's that time right there that counts. And if we don't prepare for that time, we may never have an opportunity to share the gospel with them again. See, how can we get the most out of our time with God? if we're not willing to give God our time? How can we ask God to give the most of Him if we're not willing to sacrifice our time for Him? We must seize the moment. See, Paul told us to redeem the time. See, we can't redeem the time by living it again or buying it. You see, once it's gone, it's gone. We can only redeem the time by preparing in advance, by making the most of every moment before it arrives, and begin preparing to give your best at every moment. See, are you redeeming the moments in your life, or are they just going by day after day and be gone forever? What will the answer be when you're standing before God? What would that answer be when He asks you about your time? It is my prayer that we'll be able to say that when we're standing before God, that we have done everything and we have done our best to use our time wisely. We've got to use our time wisely. Every opportunity, like I said, we've got to prepare ourselves for that moment. Like I said, God has laid a vision out for this church, and in any moment, this thing is going to take off, and we've got to be ready. Are we going to be ready for that? Let's pray. Dear Father, Lord, I just thank you, and I just praise your precious name. Lord, I just thank you, Lord, for this word and giving me this opportunity to share, Lord. Lord, I just pray right now, Lord, that every hour, every second, every minute of our days, Lord, that we make it worthy of you. Lord, that we do your work to build your kingdom, God. God, that is not about us, Lord, that everything that we do is all about you. And to build your kingdom and save the lost, and save the ones that are hurt. The ones that the world has kicked off to the side that doesn't want nothing to do with them, Lord, that they feel that they're not worthy. Lord, we just pray, Lord, that you send them here to us, Lord, that we can share that gospel with them, Lord, that we can use every waking minute that we can possibly give, Lord, that we can share the gospel with them, that we can win them for you, help them build a relationship with you. Lord, I just pray, Lord, for each and every one of us, Lord, let us use our time wisely in our studies, in our prayers, in our services, Lord, that we come here and that we don't go through a routine, Lord. And Lord, I know that that's not what we do, Lord, because that we let you lead this each and every service. And Lord, I just pray, Lord, that that it stays that way, that we make it always about you and doing your work in every moment that we have serving you. Lord, I just pray, Lord, for each and every one that is here. I pray, Lord, for the needs, Lord, in their lives, Lord, the lost loved ones, the ones that are sick. Touch them, Lord. You know what they may have going on in their lives right now, Lord. Just be with them in their situations. Just give them wisdom, give them guidance. Lord, open up the doors, Lord. Let them seize that opportunity that is before them, Lord. And the ones that you don't want them to take, Lord, just close those doors. Close them, Lord, to where they don't go down the wrong path, Lord. That the only doors that are open are the ones that you want them to go through. And Lord, we just pray, Lord, that when that opportunity knocks, and when you knock at that door, Lord, that we open that door, Lord, and that we welcome you in, and that we welcome that opportunity, and that we do it and we fulfill it to the best of our ability. Lord, I just thank you, Lord, for this church. Lord, I thank you for each and every one here, for their loving hearts, for their passion, Lord, for your word, to do your work and your will. Lord, I just pray for each and every one of them this week, Lord. Lord, as they're traveling back and forth to work, as they go their different directions, Lord, just give them safe travels. Just bring them back. Lord, I just pray for Pastor and his wife, Lord, as they lead the church with a passion, Lord, to see souls saved, making disciples, Lord, to see your kingdom being built. Just touch them, encourage them. Give them rest in their bodies, Lord. Strengthen them. Lord, I just love you and I thank you and I praise your precious name.